So many people in this country hate women. Oh, geez. Even the guy at the party who pulls out a...
The political landscape in America today is charged with tension, and few figures embody this as vividly as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, commonly known as AOC. Her statement that so many people in this country hate women has sparked heated debate, with critics arguing it paints an overly simplistic and divisive picture. It's the kind of remark that can suck the air out of a room like an overzealous partygoer strumming a guitar and killing the vibe. The critique goes deeper. If you claim to love America but harbor disdain for half its population or reject the values that have long defined it, what does that love really mean? This question lies at the heart of a growing concern about the direction of the Democratic Party, particularly as AOC is increasingly positioned as a leading figure for the 2028 presidential race. Bill Maher, a vocal commentator known for his sharp critiques, has been sounding alarms about the Democrats' trajectory. He warned them in 2024 when they pinned their hopes on Kamala Harris, a decision that ended in what many saw as a political train wreck. Now, with AOC emerging as a potential frontrunner, Maher is back, louder than ever, urging the party to rethink its strategy. His concern isn't just about one person, it's about a broader ideological misstep that could cost the Democrats another election. Maher's warnings resonate because they tap into a palpable frustration. The party seems to chase spectacle over substance, mistaking big crowds at rallies for actual electoral success. AOC and Bernie Sanders are drawing massive audiences as they tour the country, speaking at events that feel more like festivals than traditional political gatherings. Sanders even made an appearance at Coachella, which must have been a surreal moment for fans expecting music, not political sermons. But while these events generate buzz, critics argue they don't translate to votes on Election Day. Crowds at a rally are one thing, voters at the polls are another. The Democrats' fixation on charismatic figures who thrive in the spotlight might be their Achilles heel. Cory Booker, for instance, is a well-liked figure from New Jersey who once spoke for 25 hours straight, an impressive feat, but one that critics dismiss as performative grandstanding rather than the kind of leadership that wins elections. Just as AOC's name began gaining traction as a potential successor to Kamala Harris, her public appearances started raising red flags. Her media moments have been a mix of bold economic assertions and policy rants that often leave audiences more confused than inspired. From claiming that low unemployment is a facade because people are working multiple jobs to feed their families, to broad declarations about capitalism's inevitable demise, AOC's rhetoric often lacks the nuance needed to build broad support. Her statement that capitalism has not always existed in the world, and it will not always exist, dismisses the system that, for all its flaws, has lifted more people out of poverty than any other in history. Critics argue this reflects a disconnect from economic reality, one that could alienate the very voters the Democrats need to win. Maher's critique of AOC is particularly pointed. He sees her as a symbol of a larger problem within the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, a tendency to prioritize fiery rhetoric and social media clout over substantive policy solutions. Strip away the impassioned speeches and the constant online presence, and what's left is a leadership style that often feels more performative than effective. AOC's approach, Maher argues, mistakes noise for impact and aggression for vision. This is a risky bet for a party already struggling to reconnect with middle America after years of leaning into polarizing ideologies. The numbers paint a grim picture for the Democrats. Less than 1 in 4 Democrats under 30 say they're proud to be American, while 54% express embarrassment about their country. This sentiment, critics argue, reflects a growing disconnect between the party's base and the broader electorate. America isn't perfect, no nation is, but painting it as a fundamentally flawed or irredeemable place risks alienating voters who still believe in its potential. The Democratic Party's recent history doesn't help. Joe Biden's presidency ended in a haze of unfulfilled promises and public exhaustion. Kamala Harris's tenure as a candidate was marked by incoherent messaging that pushed voters away rather than drawing them in. Now, AOC appears to be doubling down on the same ideological path, embracing a worldview that critics say is out of touch with the concerns of everyday Americans. Other potential Democratic leaders, like Gavin Newsom or Tim Walz, aren't faring much better. their records are marred by controversies and policies that critics argue prioritize virtue signaling over practical governance. Newsom's tenure in California has been criticized for its handling of economic challenges and public safety, while Walz's policies in Minnesota have drawn scrutiny for their perceived disconnect from voter priorities. As a result, even loyal Democrats are starting to look elsewhere, gravitating towards centrists, independents, or simply disengaging altogether. The party's obsession with progressive ideals, often at the expense of economic pragmatism or common-sense solutions, is driving a wedge between its leaders and its base. At the core of this critique is a broader concern about the Democrats' relationship with America itself. Maher points out what he sees as a deep-seated contempt among some progressives for the country's core values. This manifests in a reflexive rejection of anything associated with political opponents, particularly Donald Trump. Policies like tax breaks for working families, border security, or energy independence are dismissed as inherently flawed if they're linked to Trump, regardless of their merits. This knee-jerk opposition, Maher argues, isn't just about resisting a single figure, it's a rejection of the practical realities that many Americans care about. By framing America as a perpetually flawed nation, some progressives risk alienating voters who still see it as a land of opportunity. This anti-American sentiment is particularly pronounced among younger liberals, who often take to social media to vent their frustrations. Platforms like Twitter can feel like a cauldron of bitterness, with users tearing into America's history, values, and symbols. The flag, once a unifying emblem, is now derided by some as a symbol of oppression. To critics, this reflects a profound lack of perspective. America, for all its imperfections, offers freedoms and opportunities that are the envy of the world. Free speech, economic mobility, and personal liberty are not just abstract ideals, they're tangible realities that millions across the globe risk everything to attain. Yet some progressives, born into this privilege, seem intent on framing their country as a villain rather than a work in progress. The irony is stark when you consider the data. Despite the narrative of systemic oppression, 72% of Black Americans under 30 are optimistic about their future in the U.S., a figure that surpasses their white counterparts. This suggests a disconnect between the rhetoric of progressive leaders and the lived experiences of many Americans. The constant focus on historical grievances, like land acknowledgments at public events, strikes some as performative rather than productive. Critics argue that if the goal is to address past wrongs, symbolic gestures won't cut it. Either take meaningful action, like returning land to indigenous communities, or move on to addressing present-day challenges. AOC's persona is another point of contention. She's cultivated an image as a working-class champion, but critics argue this is more branding than reality. Her real name, Sandy Ocasio, and her upbringing in a comfortable suburban neighborhood don't align with the gritty Bronx narrative she often leans into. Her bartending days, while relatable to many, are hardly the rags to riches tale she sometimes implies. Most college students work service jobs. It's a common experience, not a heroic origin story. Yet AOC has packaged this as proof of her authenticity, a move that critics say feels more like calculated PR than genuine relatability. As voters grow savvier, this disconnect is becoming harder to ignore. AOC's claim that so many people in this country hate women is another lightning rod. Critics argue it oversimplifies a complex issue and ignores the reality of women's rights in America compared to much of the world. Women in the U.S. can vote, own property, pursue any career, and live with a level of autonomy that remains a distant dream in many countries. They can lead companies, hold elected office, and speak freely without fear of systemic retribution. This isn't to say challenges don't exist, inequities persist, as they do everywhere, but framing America as a hotbed of misogyny seems to critics like a gross exaggeration. Disagreeing with certain progressive policies isn't hatred. It's a difference of opinion. Conflating the two risks alienating people who might otherwise support meaningful reforms. The critique of capitalism is another area where AOC and her allies face pushback. Congressman Jamal Bowman's claim that capitalism is slavery by another name is dismissed as hyperbolic by those who point to the system's track record. Capitalism, while imperfect, has driven unprecedented prosperity, innovation, and opportunity. The U.S. economy, built on free market principles, has created a standard of living that draws millions from around the world. In contrast, socialist and communist experiments, Venezuela, Cuba, the Soviet Union, have often led to economic stagnation and authoritarianism. Critics argue that dismissing capitalism wholesale ignores its role in creating the very freedoms and opportunities progressives champion. America's economic system isn't just a feature of the country, it's a cornerstone of its identity. To reject it outright, as some progressives do, raises questions about their vision for the nation's future.